3, 2, 1. أهلا وسهلا يا شباب. أنا اسمي نو واليوم أتكلم عن فيلم وحلة لوان. Hi everyone, my name is Noah and today I will be talking about the film Where Do We Go Now? The film was produced in Lebanon in 2011, written, directed, and starring Nadine Labaki as Amal, a widowed single mother. It also features Claude Baz Musaba as Takla, another widowed single mother raising an adult son and 2 teenage boys by herself, one of whom she acts as a foster mother. It also features Julian Farhat, a handyman/interior builder and Amal's love interest, and Yvonne Malouf as Yvonne, the wife of the sincere but sometimes incapable mayor of the village who acts as the de facto leader in her husband's absence. Side note 1, in films, roles change constantly. This also includes the character name. Now, sometimes it is possible to have your character named after you, which you can still create your own personal backstory for that character. Or you can loosely base a character off yourself, which, if that's your choice, then by all means, go right ahead and do it. Just know you run the risk of being typecasted. Where Do We Go Now is set during the Lebanese Civil War, which took place between 1975 to 1990. The main belligerents being various factions of Christians and Muslims. During the conflict, an estimated 120 to 150,000 people were killed, with another estimate of 76,000 refugees displaced within the country, and another estimate of 1 million refugees leaving Lebanon during the war. I've been saying estimate because no official census has been taken since 1932. Because of this, it is difficult to determine what the actual population of Lebanon was during the Civil War and what the population of Lebanon currently is. There are multiple sources as to why the war actually started, but what's generally accepted are the many factors leading to the war, such as a previous civil war in 1860, World War I, French occupation after World War I, which led to the instatement of the Maronite Christian-led government, upsetting the already established Muslim population. Click the link below to start a deep dive into the history as to why the war started and to gain a further understanding of the backdrop of our story. But for now, let's get into the review. We begin our film with the women of the village walking towards the graveyard wearing all black and with a somber expression on their faces as if they had been mourning all of their lives. Spoiler alert, they have. Out of nowhere, they start a choreographed dance, first by beating their hearts with their right hand while clutching the pictures of their deceased relatives, husbands, sons, brothers, etc. Side note 2, special shout out to the elderly women of the village, as walking and semi-dancing in time on gravel to any kind of music is very hard. Choreography for any production, whether it's film or stage, is very, very hard. We begin our actual story as if we were dropped into the middle of a village during the middle of the day with no true context of what the actual story is. Rakuz, played by Ali Haidar, is attempting to find a sufficient signal for a, what we can assume, decades-old television. Most of the viewers of this video cannot understand the complexity of that scene, as those old television sets are extremely heavy and extremely finicky in order to get a sufficient signal with those rabbit ears, aka antenna, on top of the set. But that's really no fault of your own because obsolete technology has no place in our modern society unless it's used as a prop piece. We continue our journey with Amal, who is the owner of the only village in town, which symbolically acts as the heart of the village, other than the church and the mosque, which are located within 100 yards of each other. We share a fantasy scene with Rabe and Amal, which sets the tone of the movie that this is both set in realism and fantasy. That tone is shared with a mix of sad, happiness, frustration, and ultimately heartbreak. The women hear the news of fighting breaking out within the country, all the while the men continue to live about their lives. Meanwhile, tensions within the village between Christians and Muslims continue to rise. Those tensions truly begin when Rakuz, in an attempt to steal/borrow their speaker within the Christian church, falls and accidentally breaks the crucifix on top of the altar. The reverend attempts to placate the parishioners by saying that it was an act of God that broke the crucifix, by making a point that the building itself was already old and crumbling. Meanwhile, the next day, livestock break into the mosque with the imam saying he accidentally left the door open. While the women find this hilarious, the men, particularly one Muslim man, takes offense to this and starts blaming the Christians, going so far as to breaking statues of the Virgin Mary outside of the church. From there, the women of the village, both Christian and Muslim, pull out all of the stops to make sure that the men of the village do not hear news of the war, understanding that once this news has been heard, a civil war of their own will likely follow. This includes starting an argument amongst themselves while watching news on the aforementioned old television set, faking a miracle/vision of the Virgin Mary done by Yvonne, who starts to throw a low-key shade at her neighbors while masking it as an epiphany, hiring Ukrainian belly dancers to have the men distracted by pretty girls because the only way to really get stuff done around the home is to have someone younger and prettier than you make a comment about how cluttered your living space is, and request a favor that has been asked 1,500 times by the one person who should understand what "to death do us part" and "marriage is a shared endeavor" really means. Sorry, I didn't mean to have my life projected into this review. I am not melodramatic all the time.
Yeah, you are.
Quiet backstage. The women, fed up with everyone's shenanigans of being men controlled by testosterone, hatch a plan to placate all of the men by baking hash into what I can assume is the best damn cookie in the world, because what immediately followed afterwards was all of the belly dancers distracted the men while the women went outside to find the hidden weapons cache. Sorry, I can't talk today. Hidden weapons cache, digging out the weapons, and then immediately burying them into another location. Side note 3, I can only imagine what that must have felt like for the men, because when they woke up the next day, it must have felt like the best nap in the entire world. More information about how I know that information will come later. What happened the next day was after the men woke up from their totally awesome nap, they find that their mothers/sisters/wives suddenly switched religions. All the Muslim women derobed themselves, that sounds weird, and became Christians, while all of the Christian women suddenly wore hijabs and long niqabas and suddenly became Muslim. This forced the men in the village to finally view how stupid their actions had been throughout the entire movie, while giving them one final ultimatum. If you want to start a sectarian war, hit me first. After a long, drawn-out battle of ups and downs, we end the movie on a bittersweet and plot-twisting moment. The funeral procession of one of the members comes to a literal halt when the men suddenly stop, turn around, and ask the women, "Wallah Loween," or "Where do we go now?" The member they are burying was born a Christian, but because of the sudden plot twist where all of the women suddenly became the opposite religion, he is now Muslim. There is a separate graveyard plot of Muslims and a separate graveyard plot of Christians. They don't know where to bury him. Cut to black. This movie was confirmed to be a fantasy by Labaki, while attempting to show that two opposing factions, whether it's gender, sex, religion, or whatever, can coexist peacefully, which for these women was hurling insults at each other throughout the entire movie while trying to make sure that the men don't do something stupid and kill each other. It's the equivalent of the Southern saying, "Aw, bless your heart," which is in reality a low-key insult to your face that actually means you're an idiot, while keeping their friendships intact. While I applaud the entire cast, especially since most of these actors only have one acting credit on their IMDb page, which is this movie, one actor in particular really stood out to me, Claude Baz Musaba, who played Takla. Takla's character is a stoic one. She lost her husband to war and has been left alone to raise her two sons. The adult, Issam, played by Sassin Kazali, and Nassim, her youngest, played by Kevin Aboud. Rakuz and Nassim and Issam are all cousins. Rakuz and Nassim make weekly trips into a larger city for much needed supplies to sell at the general store. But this is where the tragedy happens. One fateful night, Rakuz makes a wrong turn and ends up getting caught within the crossfire between two militant groups of Christians and Muslims. When he comes back, we see that Nassam unfortunately is dead. Nassam unfortunately took a bullet to the head, also showing that during this war, even civilians were not safe. It has been reported that religious factions from one side of the group reportedly killed point blank civilians that were of the other religious affiliation. Takla grieves but urges Rakuz to not tell Issam, as Issam is already on high tensions with the rest of the Muslims in the village. Should Issam find out this information, this is all of the justification he needs to start another battle within the village to add to the death toll. We then see Takla bathe Issam for the last time, and then Takla, Rakuz, and who I can imagine is Issam's wife, gently lower Issam into the well, effectively hiding him for the rest of the village. Takla needs to come up with a reasonable explanation as to why Issam is missing, as by this point in the movie, the women were successful in keeping the news of the war out of the village. We then see Takla storm into the church, stop at the altar, and hurl gravel onto the statue of the Virgin Mary, asking, Are you not a mother too? You take children without asking. I trusted you with him, and this is how you give him back. This scene shows what not only survivor's guilt is, but also what a crisis of faith is. Because now Takla has to live with the knowledge of yet again outliving another family member taken by war. It ends with one of the most iconic symbols in all of Christianity. The statue of the Virgin Mary begins to cry blood. Why is the statue crying? Is it because of Takla yelling at her? Or is it because that the statue, as a mother, does understand what it's like to lose a child? However you interpret the scene, it is easily, hands down, the best scene in the entire movie. Side note 3, Claude Baz Musaba, up until this production aired, had never, ever acted in her life before. Ever. That makes this scene even more poignant. Because acting, and please take this from an actor, acting is more than just performing, either on camera or in front of people. It's more than just showing emotion. Acting is about viewing reality. People come to theater to see life. And in Takla's case, that reality is all too real for the people that have to deal with that every day. To end this on a happier note, I decided to view this movie opposite of how I viewed last week's film, which if you haven't seen that yet, go and watch my review on Captain Abu Ra'ed. It is way happier. Based upon our class's rating system, I decided to give this movie 4.5 stars for 2 reasons. The first reason is the actors themselves. Half the cast, again, had never acted before. This is their only film credit on their IMDb page. My hat is off to every single one of you. Absolutely spectacular. The second reason is I had actually wanted to see the closure Rakuz could have gotten. Picture it this way. Rakuz had accidentally ventured into a war zone, saw live fire, and consequently saw his cousin die in front of his eyes. I can't imagine what his psyche must be going through for a couple of reasons. One, PTSD. Anytime someone views a very highly, intensely emotional and traumatic event, whether it's the death of a family member, live actual gunfire, a near-death experience, whatever it is, you will acquire post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The second reason is survivor's guilt is a symptom of PTSD. Now, 2 of the characters are going to have to deal with this. The first one is Takla. She now has to go with the knowledge of, aside from grieving, she outlived 2 family members, both of them taken by war, in a way. Rakuz, he actually saw his cousin die. What do you think that might actually do for him? The feelings associated with survivor's guilt is kind of a mixed bag. All of the feelings are valid, but they are also based upon logical fallacies. Here's what I mean. Why him and not me? If I hadn't taken that wrong turn, he still would have been alive. If I hadn't broken the cross, the infighting in the village would have never happened. If I hadn't attempted to find the signal at the beginning of the movie, he would not have died. Survivor's guilt is the mistaken belief that the individual could have done more to prevent the death, or that they themselves should have been the one to die. I would have loved to have seen Rakuz deal with his PTSD and his survivor's guilt, but that was not the point of this movie. If there is one thing you take away from this video log, it is this. Love the people that are close to you unconditionally, because through no circumstance of your own, through no control of your own, you may never see them again. #BeKind.